So we're going to cover in this video the part of the Maintaining a Balance Descriptor 2 syllabus that covers blood composition. So the dot points we're going to cover are these three. Identify the forms in which materials are carried in the bloodstream of mammals, including oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogenous wastes, water, lipids, salts, and the products of digestion. So how are they carried in the blood? We need to explain why oxygen is needed by cells and carbon dioxide must be removed. We need to summarise the changes that occur in the composition of blood as it's circulating around the body and identify where changes in composition occur. This is a reminder of what the blood is made up of. It's a nice graphic. It takes some time to have a look at it. We've got the whole blood over here. Mainly made up of plasma and the formed elements. If you break it down those, you've got proteins, mostly water in the plasma, and some other solutes, ions, nutrients, waste products, gases, and regulatory substances. And then in the formed elements, the red part, we've got platelets and erythrocytes. Erythrocytes are the scientific name for red blood cells. Platelets are those fragments that help with clotting. And then we've got this group called leukocytes. Leukocytes is the scientific name for white blood cells, but you can see here there are a number of different sorts. We don't need to pay attention to these different sorts yet, but it comes back up again in the immune system. So start to have a look at the different sorts there. So this slide is describing what nutrients and gases are in the blood and how it is carried around. Remembering that blood is a transport medium for cells. It takes things to cells, takes things away from cells. And it's a closed system driven by the heart pumping and with that gas exchange at the lungs. So we'll talk about carbon dioxide first. So it enters the red blood cells and is combined with water to form bicarbonate ions. Remember, we had a look at bicarbonate ions in our pH experiment. Some is attached to hemoglobin molecules in red blood cells, and a small percentage is transported in plasma as dissolved CO2. So in terms of this dot point, the most complicated gas in terms of transport is carbon dioxide, because there's three different ways it can be transported. Bicarbonate ions, binding to hemoglobin, and a small amount is dissolved into the plasma. Oxygen's fairly simple. It attaches itself to hemoglobin. That's how it's transported. It becomes a complex called oxyhemoglobin, which is represented by this HbO2. Water travels in plasma as water molecules. That's how water gets transported around. And salts are carried as dissolved ions in the plasma. Things like sodium and potassium. Please get used to these symbols here for sodium and potassium. Lipids, which are your fats, are enclosed in a package of protein to form a structure called a chylomicron and transported in lymph vessels and then in the blood plasma. So they're quite different lipids. So they have to be packaged up to get transported, and they actually transport in lymph before they enter the blood plasma. Here is a summary table. You should probably copy this into your books and learn it. So what we have is your substances, where they're transported from and to, the form that they travel in, and what carries them. So, as I said before, we've got oxygen, goes from the lungs to body cells, carried in the form of oxyhemoglobin, and it's carried by red blood cells. Carbon dioxide is carried from body cells to the lungs. It's the opposite to oxygen. The form that's carried in is mainly hydrogen carbonate ions, but also bound to hemoglobin and also dissolved in the blood, and is carried by red blood cells and plasma. Your waste nitrogenous material is taken from the liver and body cells to the kidneys. The form is mostly as urea, and it's carried by plasma. Water gets taken from the digestive system, we drink water, and the body cells to body cells. We have to keep a water balance in our cells, and that's carried as water molecules, carried by the plasma. Water's kind of a simple one. Salts come from the digestive system and from body cells. They get carried to body cells, so there is some salts needed. Sodium and potassium particularly important in cell membrane function. And they're carried as ions, so dissolved ions in the plasma. And then we've got other products of digestion there, things like glucose and amino acids. There are other important digestive products. They're from the digestive system and the liver, which stores extras, to the body cells, which is where they're needed, and they're carried as separate molecules in the plasma again. This slide covers that dot point about the need for oxygen, and then the other half of that dot point, which is about the need to remove carbon dioxide. So the short answer for why we need oxygen is cellular respiration. Start your answers to that question with cellular respiration. The long answer is that all cells require energy to drive cell metabolism. Energy is produced via the process of cellular respiration. We should know the word equation here. We don't need to know the chemical equation, but we do need to know the glucose plus oxygen, with the arrow producing carbon dioxide, water, and energy. This process, this cellular process, drives all cellular actions, functions, equations, reactions, metabolism. The need to remove carbon dioxide, we talked about the other day. Carbon dioxide is produced by cellular respiration in all cells constantly. When carbon dioxide dissolves in water, it forms bicarbonate ions and hydrogen ions. My formatting there has gone wrong, but I think you can fill it in. Carbon dioxide plus water produces carbonic acid, which produces hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. We saw this equation the other day. Dissolved hydrogen ions result in an acidic solution, and a low pH will reduce enzyme activity. We're talking about needing to maintain pH in cells and in the whole body because pH affects enzyme activity. Carbon dioxide is going to affect your pH, so you need to remove it. It becomes a toxic waste product. So this is the main part of this lesson, with changes in blood composition as it moves around the blood, as it moves around the body. You can see here on the right there's a schematic drawing of the circulatory system there. So the blood circulates through two systems in the body. You have the pulmonary system, which is where the heart pumps the deoxygenated blood to the lungs, and you exhale the carbon dioxide and then you inhale oxygen, and your oxygen comes back into the heart and then it gets pumped into the systemic system, which is the rest of the body. So the pulmonary system, blood travels from the heart, the right ventricle to be precise, to the lungs and back to the heart again into the left atrium. The purpose of the pulmonary system is carbon dioxide removal and oxygen delivery to the rest of the body. In the systemic system, you've got oxygen being delivered to cells and carbon dioxide being picked up. You've got other waste products that are picked up are urea in the liver, which is transported to the kidneys. You've got blood flowing from your small intestines that collects the products of digestion and transports them to the liver. And glucose is transported to all of the body cells for cellular respiration. So now you understand what's happening in the blood. We need to summarize the changes in the chemical composition of blood as it travels around the body. There's a table here which is a short summary of what I'm about to detail, and this is a good summary to put into your notes, but you probably need to know a little bit more than this. So you might pause here and draw that. So in the lungs, we've got gas exchange happening, and obviously the blood coming into the lungs is high in CO2, and the blood leaving the lungs is high in oxygen and low in CO2. In the body tissues, so the rest of your body, your muscle tissues, and the internal gas exchange happens in all organs of the body. So blood is taken to the organs that high in oxygen to provide oxygen for cellular respiration. It's used up by those organs, so the blood leaving those organs is low in oxygen and high in carbon dioxide. In the digestive tract, you're going to have the breakdown of food producing the small molecules that need to be transported in the blood. So the blood that's lying next to the digestive tract to collect those end products is going to become high in things like glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids, because they're the end products of digestion. They then get carried to the other cells in the body where they get used up. So that chemical composition there is obviously high in glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids as it leaves the digestive tract. The liver is where those products of digestion travel directly to. So from the digestive tract to the liver, you've got blood that's very high in glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids, and the liver controls that metabolism for food. You get an increase in nitrogenous waste, or urea, is evident in blood that passes through the liver, because the liver is where proteins are broken down. So if you eat excess protein, it can't be stored, so the liver breaks it down into basically nitrogenous waste, urea, and it gets weed out basically in your urine. So blood leaving the liver is high in nitrogenous waste, or urea. The kidneys have a function of removing the nitrogenous waste and extra water and salts from the body. So you're obviously going to have blood coming into the kidneys that's high in nitrogenous waste, and blood leaving the kidneys that's low in nitrogenous wastes. Nitrogenous waste is this general term for things like urea, creatinine, and ammonia. If you use nitrogenous waste, that's fine. Urea is also fine because it is the main part of nitrogenous wastes. When we're talking about changes in blood composition, we can always talk about carbon dioxide and oxygen and the changes in it as it passes around. And this is a good coloured diagram where you've got different sides of the heart showing your deoxygenated and oxygenated blood. Make sure you include both oxygen and CO2 when you're talking about blood. They'll be the opposite of each other wherever they are. Don't just talk about high oxygen. As soon as you say high oxygen, say low CO2. And you can see here that as the blood comes into organs, so we've got the stomach there, and the kidneys here, and the liver here, that you've got high oxygen, but as they leave here, you've got low oxygen and high CO2. This is a summary drawing of the original schematic drawing that we had of this blood system, circulatory system in the body, and how it changes its blood composition. So this is a good summary picture. You have some worksheets in your booklet that will match this, and you will need to fill in these bits to that. We'll do that in class. Thanks. And you might want to take some notes.